In a game that spans over 80 hours of gameplay, there's bound to be a moment or two that sticks in the brain, and we've already discussed our fair share of them. This week, we center our discussion on the moments that stuck with us, both big and small, and see how they stack up to make Final Fantasy VII an adventure for the ages. Time to grab our favorite chocobo, line them up at the starting gate, and do ourselves some awkward 32-bit racing as we embark upon Final Fantasy VII, Part 7, Memories and Moments. Starting us off with some introductory thoughts is the one and only Greg Sewart of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of YouTube videos, followed by a moment of true discovery with Julian Titus of the Stage Select podcast and Kyle of the RPG Show. So yeah, large moments and small moments. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII is this huge game. Do you remember any of the? I like focusing on small moments, as you know, because those are the ones that we don't talk about too much, and we could talk about Aerith getting stabbed, and we can talk about, the plate falling from Midgar, like these big set pieces. I'd like to first focus on those smaller moments though, because there's a lot of them in this game, and there's a lot of grace notes. The way I've come to describe the story of Final Fantasy VII is, if Final Fantasy VI and previous were these kind of straight lines with branching paths that would then connect back to each other, I feel like 7 is this one column of all these tightly woven, interconnected, and somewhat confusing narratives that's leading. It's like a column of stories. It's like have you seen the second season of Loki? The loom. It's like the loom. It's like a loom of just like stuff. It's all the strands of time are interwoven into this big cylinder of story. Right. It's still one thing, but it's got all these webs in it.
I mean, I think there were the touching there were touching moments between Cloud and Tifa, especially in the flashbacks, which I really enjoyed. But I mean, other than that, like, it's funny looking back at this. I mean, I've played through this game maybe twice, but I played through it when it came out, and to me, they were the big moments that stuck with me. And so much of my memory of the game is locked in Midgard. The way that whole first section is done, I mean, I even enjoyed like the train ride back after the first mission. Just little things like that.
Yep.
Or, going through the town when they're kind of all trying to split up so they can get back to the train after that first mission, when you first meet Aerith. But none of them really jump out at me. I do think that story-wise, the ability to do multiple discs and the amount of storage space they had on it really let them let their story ideas breathe more than we were used to.
But I think it's interesting because I think the bigger story beats, even though they were breathing, it didn't allow for those little ones to hit as hard as they did. Because again, I asked this question for months now with all the SNES and the NES games, and everyone can pick out these little moments of like, the moment when you play Pretty Woman with Gao, or this small moment. I think the big bombastic nature of the CGI and the graphical fidelity, I feel like blanks out all of those grace notes. So when I do watch a video of Final Fantasy VII storylines, I always forget Hojo's a character. Like, I forget.
Yeah.
Because Hojo is really the big bad of this game. Like, Sephiroth is, again, just another creation of something that wants something that, he's a creation. Hojo is like the evil mastermind, and I forget he's even in the game. Like, Rufus is in the game a ton, and I have to watch a video on YouTube to remember he existed, and I'm like, wow, he's important. So it's really interesting that when people talk about Final Fantasy VII, it's usually around Cloud and Sephiroth and Tifa and Aerith. There's not many people going to bat for Yuffie or Kate Sith, like it's all the little grace notes that are there. If you really dig it and really dive in, they're there, but they're obscured by this just giant bombastic thing. And I think that's when Final Fantasy became more of those event style games, which I think continued on and continued to continue on as the series progressed.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I guess that's that goes sort of part and parcel of what we were saying about like the artistry being ramped up, the CGI being used, this, you know, how it was a much more multimedia experience. It's really, I think, comparable to you know, talking about an art house film and a blockbuster.
Yeah.
Because Final Fantasy VII was their blockbuster, and it's what Final Fantasy became from that point on.
Yes.
When it hadn't really been that way before that.
Nope. Yeah, you're right. It was building towards that. It was always getting to, it was building towards that. But with the new hardware, like you said, and the new ability to really just say, hey, we're going to have 3 discs and we are just going to make the biggest thing we can. There's lots of fun things in Final Fantasy VII, though. I was amazed as I was going through some of my research and refreshing myself. All the little emergent gameplay stuff there is in that game. There are so many opportunities to, I don't know, have a slap fight with this person, or, you know, all the stuff that happens at the Honeybee Inn and all these like little time segments and snowboarding, and not even just mini games, but like mini events almost to a certain extent. I was surprised how much of that is in this game.
Yeah, I mean, when you think back on it, like you said, the snowboarding, the thing that really stands out to me is actually the motorcycle section as well at the end of Midgard too, which again, you hadn't seen in Final Fantasy. I think you're right. The Final Fantasy games on the Super Nintendo were aspirational. They were trying to do that stuff, but they were really locked in by the amount of space they had and what the system was capable of doing. I was even thinking too, I remember the first time getting out into the actual world, because so much of that game does take place in Midgard. You're really never, you know, for a long time, you're never in an overworld. You are moving from one rendered scene to another.
Yep.
And sometimes an animated scene to another, but you never ever sort of get the like, here it is. And you finally leave Midgard for the first time. And you have this big open world in front of you, which isn't weird for a role-playing game.
Right.
But the difference being is that it was a big 3D world that you could see a horizon on. And we hadn't had that before. Square had tried to do it with using Mode 7 and tilting the world, and that was very effective in the early 90s. But this time, like I remember, what are they called? The weapons? Remember there was like these big lumbering...
Yes.
I remember one in particular, this big lumbering thing that just walked around the world. And I'm sure it was constrained into some spot, but I remember seeing that for the first time in the overworld and being like, oh my God, what's that? Yeah. You know, so it definitely lent itself to, it gave you a sense of scale of the world. You weren't locked into this little 4:3 screen that would scroll endlessly, but it's still, the world didn't feel nearly as big as it did when you stepped out into the overworld in Final Fantasy VII, which I think was a big moment for the series. That, there you go, a moment that I think a lot of people would forget, but I remember it having an impact on me. But I also remember it because I was so fully invested in the sort of the steampunk / like Blade Runner style that we were seeing in Midgard, that I have to say, I remember being disappointed when I stepped out in a way too, because it was this sort of this green lush world, and it's like, well, this isn't what I've been, this isn't the setting I've fallen in love with over the last 4 or 5 hours.
That's very interesting.
Long that took.
Yeah.
I got over it pretty fast, but I still, you know, I kind of loved where we were going with the Midgard setting up until that point.
Yeah, it is a huge shift when you get out to the open world and you realize, it's actually green, and it's not all metal and slums and dirt and grime. It's actually, hey, this kind of feels like a Final Fantasy game again. Exactly. I just feel, and there's a small town I can go to. Oh, cool. I remember this now. It's been 10 hours, but I remember this now.
Yeah, time to start grinding.
Yeah, and I can also see how that would be surprising for somebody who doesn't know the games well, too. I'm curious how people felt about it who had never played a Final Fantasy game before. Maybe their reaction was the opposite, like, what's this? Wait, why is the music softer? And where's my cool steampunk, Fantasyland? This is weird.
Right.
Very interesting sea change moment for the series, where it's a very interesting moment. And again, I think depending on who you talk to, I think it changed for better and for worse in some aspects. talk a bit about memorable moments. I always do that on the show, so I figured why not mess with a good thing? What are some of those big moments that you resonate with you, and some little moments? Because I always love talking about the smaller beats in games, because everyone's going to talk about the Aerith scene and how they cried, and that's a thing that was shocking to me, even as a late 20 and something playing it on my PS3. What are some of those big and small moments that you remember fondly?
I mean, I've talked about the intro, like that was definitely a big thing. Oh yeah, because I had played through that like so many times in the demo, right? Because that was how I first played Final Fantasy VII, was the demo that came with Tobal number 1. So that was obviously like the first like really big thing. But I think the thing that sticks out even more than that for me, thinking back to like the initial playthrough, was leaving Midgar for the first time, because it does a really great job of tricking you into thinking that this is the game, that you were just going to be in this massive city, which would have been fine, I think, at that time, and almost understandable. And then, no, you get out and you hear the overworld music for the first time, and your character is so small on the screen, just like it was in Final Fantasy 4 and 6, and all of a sudden you're hit with like the enormity of the world, like what it actually is, and how just even with like the 97 PlayStation graphics, they do a great job of illustrating just how dingy Midgar is. Like it is shrouded in gloom. And then the moment that you take a few steps away from it towards calm, everything is brighter and everything is green. And it's like, and you don't realize that that's what you were missing until you realize that it's there. And then you're like, oh, I needed this. Yeah. And then you get to a traditional Final Fantasy village in calm. And it's like, oh, yeah, no, this feels good. I liked that industrial sci-fi element of Midgar, and that's a really cool thing, but it's nice that this is here was very comforting, and so that was definitely like a huge moment for me.
Come back to Final Fantasy VII, what are some standout moments for you, just as far as just gameplay moments and things that pop out to you as we're kind of talking about it?
Yeah, so I'd say right away, leaving Midgar. I think leaving Midgar is just this whole like wow factor that the game opens up to you. You've spent, I mean, once you know how to play the game, you've probably spent 8 to 10 hours. But initially, when you're talking to everybody, when you're searching through everything, fighting 1,000 battles, you're spending 20 some hours in Midgar, and then there's a whole other world outside of it that you have to go explore. Right. So I think seeing that for the first time was just, whoa, I couldn't believe that was happening. I'd say being that young at the time, the Midgar Zolom, that was pretty memorable. Like, holy crap, this boss is different. I've seen some bosses in games that'll steal the princess or, like run a helicopter through a city, but not a guy who's putting a 30-foot snake on a pike. That's new.
That's unique. Yep.
Exactly.
To say Final Fantasy VII is full of high drama may be the understatement of the century, but it all doesn't have to be these huge standout moments. To talk about some of the game's more concisely dramatic moments is the Let's Play Princess of Nerds Broadcast, followed by content creator Mekel Kasanova, and then Eddie Varnell joins the show. And then Eddie Varnell of the Boss Rush Network joins the show. So what about Final Fantasy VII? Obviously, you said graphically it was incredibly impressive. Even back in 2001, it was still probably considered, pretty impressive, even though that's, 5 years after or 4 years after it was released.
I still think parts of that game look fantastic.
I agree. I think
that's the thing. I don't judge graphics based off of modern specs. I will always base graphics upon what it was like at the time, and also for modern games like Crow Country, does it do well with what they're trying to emulate?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think the art design is actually really, really cool. And again, I've been rewatching a lot of YouTube videos on just, again, refreshing myself in the story, and some of that stuff is really, really awesome. Were there any moments in Final Fantasy VII that you remember really just hitting you over the head like, whoa, this is incredible or impactful?
The date.
The date. Aw, the date. How did your date go?
The first time with Aerith.
Yeah.
And Interrupted by Fireworks has not only become my favorite or one of my two favorite songs from Final Fantasy VII, it's kind of replaced her theme as her theme.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I can totally see that. That is cool. So the first time it was Aerith. What about the second time?
Probably Tifa.
Probably Tifa, yeah. That's fair. That's interesting. In the battle between Aerith and Tifa, whose side are you on? Because I know that's a big thing in the fandom.
Mean.
I know.
You're going to be called Chocobo Bill for the rest of this episode.
I know that's a big... I don't have a huge opinion on it. Again, I played it 10, 13 years ago. I was like, oh, this is fine. So I don't have the connection that a lot of people have. So I'm just curious if you have that. If not, which is fine too.
I was an Aerith person, but I know that the canon is Tifa. Because even the movie pretty much states, hey, it's Tifa.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. I know. Tifa has a lot more role to play, although Aerith is extremely important. That's how we get holy, and that's how you can beat the final Sephiroth.
And she even has a level 4 and an ultimate weapon, and a weapon that's better than her ultimate weapon, which is 100% easier to get. Not that you'll see any of this.
No, as you exactly. Not, and that any of this will be visible or playable for you. Any other moments that you remember really fondly about Final Fantasy VII? Again, it's a huge game. I know there's a lot to kind of comb through.
I love Cosmic Canyon's theme. That's my second favorite theme from that game.
That's a great theme.
I love the fact that even at the beginning, we can kind of tell that Hojo is... Well, Sephiroth is the main villain of the base game of Final Fantasy VII. Hojo is, in technicality, the main villain of the entire Final Fantasy VII sub-franchise.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yes. I think because he is the catalyst for all of this. And
he does that. He does Genesis and Angelo. He possesses Weiss, which is like the whole point of Dirge of Cerberus. He is behind so many different subplans. And he's a mad scientist. What isn't there to love?
It's science without any thought of whether or not you should do things. Hey, should I inject myself with Genova cells? Should I? I don't know. Let's give it a shot. Why not?
Screw it. Whatever. What happens? Ooh, I become a tactical monster. This is great.
Wow.
Time to save my son. Time to shoot a giant laser that's being powered by a city.
The story of Final Fantasy VII is actually very interesting. And actually, I finished watching a video actually yesterday about that kind of goes through chronologically the story, and it spans a huge amount of time in just the base game. They're not even bringing up all the other games and Rebirth and
Cerberus. You have is it 2,000 years ago Genova lands, which is kind of terrifying. Oh my god, there's probably more of them out there.
Yeah.
Then we have the Cetra, we have the Gi, which actually do get explained in Rebirth what they are, and actually explains where the black materia comes from, which is really interesting. You have one of the best set pieces that they better not take out of part 3. Tifa and Scarlet's little slap fight on top of the Sister Ray.
I was thinking about a lot of the aspects of that. That's a very funny. That moment is so strange, and there's a lot of really interesting moments in Final Fantasy VII where the gameplay switches up, where you do silly things like that. There's a lot of that in Final Fantasy VII. I forgot. Again, as I was,
do you want an escape room? Do you want a snowboarding simulation?
Sure, it's fun, and the snowboarding is fun. I remember having a lot of fun snowboarding. Slap fights, and you can dress up in a brothel. Or
Claudia is great. How dare you?
I didn't say anything. I didn't say not great at all.
Somebody
Fantastic.
out there did. Claudia is wonderful. Everybody.
Claudia. Claudia. Yeah, it's fantastic. But I just forgot how much of these little interactive beats there are that break up the gameplay in Final Fantasy VII. There are so many of them.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
We never needed a battle with Dyne and Barrett, but we got it. And it definitely helps with his character development. There are a lot of little mini stories layered throughout. Like, let's be honest, the plot line with the huge materia kind of goes nowhere. It's just a side quest that at the end of the day didn't do anything. Like, it's a plan that failed. But it also gives Sid a closure about one of the biggest goals in his life. He always wanted to go to space.
Right. It's the stories in Final Fantasy VII are much more, I would say, intertwined than I would say in previous entries, where you have like your main quest and your side quests. But the story of Final Fantasy VII is very just mixed and integrated with everything. It's very interesting the way they've set that game up, where they all everything kind of converges. So even like you said, the huge materia, it doesn't really have a huge payoff because it doesn't work, but it leads to something else. What else about Final Fantasy VII did you want to talk about? Because it's, again, a huge game. It's hard to encapsulate everything in an hour, but I'm obviously doing a lot of interviews. So I just want to really focus in on the stuff that you found personally impactful through the game.
Well, then, I kind of want to go back to Interrupted by Fireworks.
Okay, go for it.
Because, like I said, that song definitely feels more like Aerith's theme than Aerith's theme to me. And that was the first time that music had a story to it in my eyes without the use of lyrics. Because that song starts very high, not high-pitched notes, but, the higher range of notes, those higher E's and everything.
Yep.
And it's just this lovely piano playing, and then a second piano kind of joins in, and you're on this really nice date with whoever you got. Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, who cares?
Yep.
But then, about the 75% to 80% mark of that song, it becomes very somber. And when I heard that the first time ever, because again, being well read and everything, I went, oh, this can't last forever. It really is a bittersweet song where it reminds you by the end, hey, we do have to go. And maybe things won't be okay for a little bit. We've hit this little somber mark. But it will get better in the end. It really feels like musical foreshadowing for the big event of the game, which is Aerith's death.
That's a really interesting way of putting that, because you're right. It does conclude with something that's more somber, and it does seem to match that vibe, right? That kind of theme of eventually the party has to end, and eventually the good times can't be forever.
One scene I would say, I think, oh, this is gonna give me hot water. Okay.
Come on.
You guys can find me. I'm on all social media at Mekel Kasanova. Come on, bring the smoke. I got the fire. Bring some meat. We're gonna barbecue. We're gonna move some furniture up in here.
Let's go.
The scene with Dyne and Barrett, when we learn more about Marlene, and that, I think that was masterfully done in the original, and was a debacle in Rebirth.
Interesting. Okay, I haven't played Rebirth yet, so I'm curious where the differences lie.
The scene with Dyne and Barrett. Do you mind about? You don't mind?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Spoil away. Go for it, man.
So you remember how like Dyne took his own life, and basically he's so mentally broken, he just, there's no redeeming him. at that point. He's done so many, like, he literally the duality of Dying and Barrett are two people who are at the they're at the polar ends of the spectrum of,
Yep.
you know, one traumatic event and where that leads them. The way it's done in Rebirth, Dying doesn't really take his own life in a sense. He's gunned down by Shinra. And I feel
really?
yeah. And the fact that they, right after that, have a goofy scene, I'm like, it took so much of the atmosphere from that. And it's like, I get it. Alternate continuation timeline.
Sure.
But it's like that was once that was a scene in an area that really just stuck with me because it gave so much depth to Barrett. It gave you an understanding of why he is the hard ass that he is.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess going back to the original, I wanted more with Barrett, and that was the end of his arc.
That was it. You're right. That's basically it. Yeah, that's kind of where it leaves it. Yeah.
And Rebirth just, I have a lot of feelings about that game. I know there are people that
it's all good. I'm looking at some moments of that scene as we were talking, and I think one of the lines is Dyne says, "These hands are a little too stained to carry Marlene anymore." Like that is
yeah.
Whew,
that is heavy.
and
Especially as a parent.
And Barrett replies, "My hands ain't any cleaner." Like that's
right.
Woo.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like it hits harder as a parent now.
Yeah.
To be able to understand like that dynamic of the weight of those lines. And it's like I remember talking to, I know a lot of the YouTube essayists, theory, Final Fantasy folks, and 99% of them are not parents. So that when they talk to me about that scene and they talk about, oh, it's so much better in Rebirth, I'm just like, yeah, but you're not a parent, so you don't understand the gravity of it.
Yeah,
it hits way different.
Yeah, totally. No, there's no question. It's just, and that's actually, I think, something you can't have that connection unless you are a parent. And not to say that people can't have that kind of empathy. I'm not saying that, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's just going to taste different.
Yeah.
When you self-insert into that, it's just going to taste different. There's just nothing. And again, that's not knocking people who don't have that feeling towards it or who don't have that experience. But yeah, no, that's a tough moment. Speaking of cool stuff, are there any other? I always like highlighting small moments in games. Because we always talk about the big moments, the gold saucers. What are any small moments in Final Fantasy VII that remember just hitting you a certain way?
Tifa and Scarlet slap fight.
I love that. That is so wild.
The Real Housewives of Final Fantasy, because Tifa was just like, you trick. Slap. I mean, Scarlet smacked her, and I was just like, y'all smacking each other on the cannon, and then hearing it from the PlayStation, it was just like, and going back and forth, and it was just like, you got to play that as a mini game. And stuff. Yep. And it was just so amazing because they're just like, Tifa, you should have knocked the mess out of her. But they were just like, you guys are going to slap each other until a cutscene happens.
That's wild. That's so funny.
But it's so good. Definitely the Chocobos. I love. Barrett's, his daughter. Just like that story, like, even though Barrett was just this rough and tough, hard pressed kind of guy, you really grew to him throughout the game and stuff, because like, even though him and Cloud didn't kind of get along, they had a level of respect there. And even at the end, Cloud and Barrett really understood each other and stayed with each other. Like I literally used Barrett, I would say 97% of the game. Like he was in my party. Him, Aerith, and Tifa were like literally 97% of the game. Like once I lost Aerith, it was just Barrett and Tifa in the cloud.
It is time once again to say thank you to our fantastic and sensational patrons. Starting off with Seth Sergio of the All End Media Network, Julian of the Stage Select Podcast, Tim Knowles, formerly of The Elitist, BT Goebbels, The Let's Play Princess, Games with Coffee, the aforementioned Greg Sewart, Terry Kinnair, Joey Coro, Philip Becker, Lindsay Harney, and the one and only editor extraordinaire, Pete Harney. If you'd like to join these sensational human beings, then mosey on over to patreon.com/agamerlooks40, check out the tiers, and sign up today. And if not, a free way to support the show is give us a quick rating or review on your pod player of choice. Let's rejoin the episode. Continuing our conversation about former Turks, genre shifts, and a particular den of ill repute that seared itself into our adolescent brains is Matt and Geoff of the Fun and Games podcast, followed by the one and only Games with Coffee. I'd like to pivot a little bit to moments in the game. Obviously, the game is full of these huge moments. I'd love to hear about some of even the smaller moments that impacted you when you played it. Because again, like I said before, I feel like Final Fantasy VII is this big blockbuster made by a really good indie director. That there's all this cool stuff in there, but sometimes it gets hidden by the explosions and the Shinra reactors and all. So the Maker reactor. So what are some like moments that you remember really hitting you hard or just really impacting you?
I mean, I think one of the first ones for me, there's the moment, right? Which I'm trying
to... Yeah, and we can talk about the moment. I mean, it's almost impossible to talk about this game without discussing it. So we want to just go there. Yeah.
I mean, it was probably the first cross-dressing side quest that I'd ever played in a video game. Are we not? Oh, right. Yeah.
The other one.
Oh. I mean, she was involved.
So it's funny you mentioned the Don Canario stuff, or Cornelio. What the hell is Cornelio? Thank you,
Don Cornelio.
Like the scene where Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith threaten him and what they're going to do to his member is just like, that's a memorable moment because I just hadn't heard. It was just so foul and awesome and was just, and the love letter to that scene and that area in the remake, I think is one of my favorite moments in gaming. Cloud's reaction. Yes, I know, I nailed it. Moving on. They don't make yes. It's just. Because the original one in 7 could be considered kind of homophobic in some of the depictions and what's shown. I think
I would give it a fair for its day rating, but that's me personally, and I'm not making that a bold declaration. But playing it in the remake was beautiful, and that actually that gave me some feelings. More than a few.
So Matt, you mentioned some smaller moments though that you want to highlight. So I'd love to hear that.
Sure.
Coming up.
First has to do with my boyfriend and my favorite character in the game, which is Vincent Valentine. Yes. Geoff is not surprised in the slightest. When you first meet him in the Shinra Mansion and he rises out of the casket, I was just like, who is that? But also who is that? He's so cool. He's got a gauntlet arm and he's holding a gun. He's Barrett has a gun.
The only sensible weapon in Final Fantasy VII for your party.
Pretty much.
Everybody's got a damaging weapon in some way, which is better than some Final Fantasy parties. But in a world like Final Fantasy VII, where there is the cyberpunk city, only one person just carries a sidearm.
And
he's the corpse.
He's the corpse. But when you first fight him and he transforms and then he eventually joins you and his limit breaks transform him into stuff. I thought he was so cool. And to this day, he's so cool. He's just the coolest character. And his Matt Mercer does such a killer job as him. I love Stephen Bloom's performance. I'm a fan of Stephen Bloom, and his performance in Advent Children is really great. But there's something about Matt Mercer's nuance in Rebirth and how he's paying homage to Stephen Bloom also, because they're peers. It's just incredible. But like, I really love that moment. Like, it's so gothic, right? In this game that's been like tech and cyberpunk, and then you're just in this mansion and it becomes basically a horror movie, like a scene out of Resident Evil. And it's so cool. I really love it. So that's probably one of my more memorable, like, smaller moments or character moments for sure.
Yeah,
and
I think it's funny.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I just want to come in real quick about on Matt. I also love what they do with his, because again, he's an optional character. Like, you don't have to run into Vincent,
right?
But I love what they do with his. I think his mom, right? Like his mother. I think towards
Lucretia.
Lucretia, yeah. Or is it?
No, that's Sephiroth's mother. That's Vincent's erstwhile lover.
Right. That's okay, right? Thank you. But yeah, they do a lot of cool stuff with this character too. Like, they do a lot of really cool things with that. So go ahead, Geoff. You're gonna comment.
I mean, he's also a guy. He's also a character where the pieces are there and things are put together. And if you talk to him early on, there's almost like oh, cool, there's some answers. Well, that's fun. But the really cool thing is, yeah, like you said, Matt, the game kind of goes a little horror for a second. It started off cyberpunk. There's some fantasy there. Final Fantasy VII, I think, more than any other Final Fantasy, does a good job of, hey, kids, follow me. Suddenly we're this genre for a little while. And you just kind of go, yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah, cool. We're in Atlantic City now for a while and just playing arcade games. That's fine. Cool. Now we're before that, we're dealing with the despondency of, basically Walmart coming into town and setting everything on fire. Oh, that's cool. You have horror, you have beach vacation, you have chocobo racing, you have all sorts of just different genre shifts that go on. And you just go, yeah, man, sure. Can these all coexist? Why not? Right? Why not?
Yeah, no, totally.
I was really struck how much of those things are in this game. I completely forgot all these little side events, not even like mini games, like mini events almost, like your snowboarding and your slap fest, which is
the motorcycle combat.
The
slap fest is the one mini game that I go, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything when Aerith's holy materia bounced perfectly on every step. I don't care about the music. The music's music. It's non-diegetic. But it kept changing trajectory just to do that. That's fine. If we want to play with all kinds of physics, how we can jump so high, whatever else. Tifa losing a slap fight to Scarlet
doesn't make sense.
In no way, shape or form, or condition. Tifa couldn't lose a slap fight to Proud Claude, let alone Scarlet. But that's fine.
There's no amount of suspension of disbelief will allow that to be an actual thing we can ingest, right?
Do not do my girl, my friend, like that. Yeah. Do not do Tifa dirty that way.
No, you can't do it. You can't do it.
No, do not.
And there's lots of big spectacle in that game, but there's also a lot of small moments that are really fun and interesting. I'd love to hear what some of the smaller moments that you remember really impacting you. And again, it could be as a kid or even now when you play it, because you still, I'm sure you've played this game dozens and dozens and dozens of times at this point.
I'm probably nearing about 32.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome, man.
Across various platforms. I have this game on pretty much every platform you can think of. So
it's on everything. Yeah,
it's on everything.
Little moments.
Let's go. Oh, the first one is the cross-dressing sequence. That's the biggest one.
That's the biggest little moment in the game, probably. But you're right.
Little moment. It's just. I mean, Cloud cross-dressing as a woman to save his childhood friend, and Aerith was the one who put it up to it. It's like, you're doing this. It's like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And now I'm like, I'm in a dress.
Great. It's really funny.
Another really great moment, actually, another small moment was the first flashback sequence with Cloud and Tifa and the promise they made back in Nibelheim when they were just under 13, going on 14, which is insane when you think about it. You're 14 years old. You're leaving your hometown to go to this big city to find a job. In Cloud's case, he's going to join their army, their military, in hopes of becoming a soldier. You don't really realize it. You stop to realize that they're basically hiring child soldiers to do their dirty work. Like Shinra, I'm talking about. Shinra hires child soldiers
That's wild. You're right.
Yeah.
Dang, I never thought of that.
Yeah, like Cloud was 16 years old during the Nibelheim sequence. He was a teenager holding a rifle, wearing like infantry gear.
Oof.
That's
wow.
It's heavy.
That's a lot.
Right?
It is pretty heavy. You're 100% right. That is extremely heavy. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's a very interesting point for sure. Yeah, man. Any other? Yeah, let's go ahead. Sorry.
And then like other moments too. Cher's backstory with Sid about how she inadvertently ruined his dream of going into space. Like he couldn't just let her die, despite no matter how much tough talking he does. He has a soft spot for Shara, and he didn't want her blood on his hands. So aborted the launch, but now he turned into this grouchy sourpuss that really wanted his dream to be fulfilled. Yuffie and her father and the relationship with each other. That was also an interesting. Like, there's lots of small little moments because 7. What's beautiful about 7 is that it took the losses that you feel in 6 during the World of Ruin, and they make them more personal and personable. Right, everyone in that game experiences a personal loss in their character arc, and it's my view that the gang they don't just journey around the world just to stop Sephiroth, but they actually do it to confront their losses and work through them. Right,
that's an awesome point. Yeah, man.
Like for instance, Red 13. Like he hates his dad. He hated his dad more than anything. But the thing is, he didn't understand. He didn't know or understand the truth until you go through the Cave of the Gi, and you go all the way to the end, and you see that his father's like petrified by multiple spears entering his body, stood there as a silent guardian to prevent them from entering Cosmo Canyon. And then once Red sees that, he's like, "Whoa, okay. I just have my mind blown. I thought my father was a coward, but he really was the one who saved the village after all that." Yep. Right? It's things like that make 7 just so memorable in my eyes. Just there's so much. There's so much.
Finishing out the episode with a grab bag of moments, both large and small, and everything in between, is John Trenbeath of the Beat Crones Foundation, followed by more thoughts from Mekel Kasanova. Then Mike of the Distorted Illuminations YouTube channel adds his recollections, and finally Julian of Stage Select returns with some closing thoughts.
Something just hit me in thinking of it being a product of its time. Something else that kind of has a jumping around story, but is considered, I don't know if a masterpiece, but definitely like, oh, you've got to see this movie, is Pulp Fiction, with the way the story jumps around. Because if you're not paying attention, it's like, why are we back at the diner?
Yep.
Like, that was the beginning of the movie. Okay, we're back at the beginning of the movie. Things were told out of order. So thinking of that in how it's like, well, no, now we got to play catch up. Like you said, we got to go back 2,000 years, and Alien Mama comes out of the sky and kills the old guard that was here, and the few that survived, well, they had magical powers, and we can use that as a resource to sell to people.
Yeah, right. That's fair.
But little moment is when you're in Wall Market and you have to dress up Cloud to go get, dress him up like one of the girls.
One of the gals. Yep.
So that he can maybe get picked by Don Corneo, and of course you're going to put in the extra time to make that happen. A game of its time, yet also ahead of its time.
It's like,
because I know.
Go ahead. Sorry.
when the remake came out, a lot of people are like, are they really gonna put that back in the game? And hell yeah, they did.
Yeah.
I was so happy they did. You know, and yeah, you know, a lot of the little moments, of course, are gonna be the Golden Saucer playing countless hours of snowboarding.
So much snowboarding, and it's so fun and so good. I love snowboarding in that game.
It's so
great.
much fun.
What other small moments do you remember from Final Fantasy VII that resonate with you, or big ones too? We can just talk about some of the other big hitters, but let's talk about smaller moments because again, they're all hidden, and yeah, just curious if you have anything else that kind of really resonated.
At the time, I think the situation between Yuffie and her dad, Goto, I think that was and just like the not getting along aspect, I resonated with that. Just because, like, that's similar to my relationship with my dad in many ways, where it's like, hey, I want you to do this and blah, 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 you're doing that. Or, you know, like, I resonated with that. That was a moment which I feel like, again, that was completely missable. But, like, it did a lot to add their character depth to Yuffie that, honestly speaking, she had none. Her and Vincent really didn't have any unless you did their side quests. They didn't really factor into the main overall narrative at the time, given their option status. I will say, Sid was him and Shara.
Yeah, right.
So Sid and Shara. That was their dynamic. I mean, at the time, I was like, why is he so vulgar? You know?
Yeah.
You know, and like looking back on it, that didn't age very well.
No.
Like, it really didn't. But like the small moments that where they tried to tell that story with him and her about how he really did care about her. He really did love her. And her love and devotion to him. I thought when they got around to clearly putting that front and center, I thought it was really, really, really touching, you know? It's just hard to separate that from how abusive he was.
It's a challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge.
And then I think the other thing was like the moment where when you were at you know, the smaller things, when you started picking up on like the Turks with how Rude had this big crush on Tifa, and if he played it, he would never attack Tifa.
That's right. That's a good point.
He would never attack her, and it's like it was a small thing that, you know, I started to realize. I was like, Tifa is my ace in the hole. If I take out everyone else, then and leave Rude, then she can just demolish him.
Yeah,
it's like and like the fact that they incorporated how he felt about her subtly, might I add, through the story, but also through the gameplay, I thought was very, very.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think there's and I think the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII 2 is actually super solid. I was surprised when I was going through my research and kind of recollecting on it, how many little divergent gameplay moments there are in that game. Like where I would call them like gameplay events, not mini games, because there's mini games, but things like the famous slap fight or, you know, or all the timers that tick down, or I have to get through this little time section. All these little events. There's a lot of that in Final Fantasy VII, which is cool. I actually appreciate that. I think it's actually really neat. So, what other thoughts on Final? Do you have any big moments of Final Fantasy VII that you remember fondly? like obviously it is the big one, the biggie, one of the biggest moments in all of games. It's hard to talk about 7 without discussing that.
Look, if I'm gonna think 7, it's not Aerith I think of first. I know everyone's all, oh, she died. Tella died in 4, and I liked him more than Aerith. But no, it is a great moment. Like, I'm not going to deny how well that was done, even if advertisements spoiled it for everybody. But no, it's the period of time Sid takes over the party.
Interesting.
One, because you kind of finally get to see Barrett come to terms with his own fanatical mindset from the beginning parts of the game and realizing, look, I was a terrible leader for Avalanche. I need to kind of step back and realize my own faults here before I screw things up for everybody. I like that realization for him.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. It's odd that they would choose Barrett, though. Not Barrett, sorry. It's odd they choose Sid, because he kind of just showed up.
Well, and was like, for a little while at that point.
Yeah, I guess. Good point.
It's one of those things I get how, because you have to go a process of elimination. Barrett steps back because he realizes how screwed up he was to do all that he did.
Right.
You have... Then if you just start looking at all the other people, you're like, yeah, it kind of has to be Sid, doesn't it?
Kind of does. I guess that's a very interesting point based on everyone else's personality. That is a good point.
But then you get to him going up into the space in the rocket and all that. Again, He was my favorite character for meeting him, and you get such a great scene and moment there.
That you do get some really good moments from that, for sure.
Smaller moment that I really like was all of the wall market stuff. Going through and trying to get the right outfit for Cloud, which I didn't do because I barreled through it in a week. So
right.
I just kind of did what I thought was right, and it didn't really go all that well, but it was still pretty fun, although pretty dark. Like once you really stop to think about, and I knew this at the time, but I was also a dumb teenager, but when you actually do get to Corneo now, as we've learned, when you're talking to him as just the three of you, and it's like, oh no, yeah, this is not good. This is real bad. This is super dark, but still done in a relatively humorous way, and he gets his comeuppance, and I still remember the talk or I'll chop it off, talk or I'll smash it. Right. Yep. Like just like great bits of dialogue there. Another small part, and this is actually mainly because of the Square Roots podcast, is and it's become a meme now, but did Sephiroth do this? Like that you can apply that towards so many things. It's a great line.
Yep.
I'm trying to think, the problem is that since I only really played it the one time, it's a lot of that stuff has kind of faded away. Another small moment doesn't make any sense, and it's so weird, but fighting Palmer in Rocket Town, and then him doing the nanner and running away at the end of the battle, only to get run over by a truck that comes out of nowhere, is such a bizarre thing. And my problem with Final Fantasy as it's gone further and further into bleeding edge graphics and realism is that you lose the ability to do dumb stuff like that.
Yeah. You don't have the opportunity for a slap fight anymore.
Exactly.
That's the silliest thing. That is such a Monty Python moment. It's literally out of a comedy sketch. Yeah, it's the pratfall at the end of a sketch. Yeah, that's a very good point. I was surprised when I was again doing my research how many variations of gameplay there is too. There's all sorts of little mini game type things, which continues through 8 and 9 especially. and kind of dies off around 10, but all of like the slap fight or the opportunity when you're all these different timed things that you do throughout the game. All the stuff you can do in the Golden Saucer, of course, which is a real mini game, but still, there's a lot of opportunities for other types of gameplay in 7, which I appreciate. I was like, that's actually kind of cool. And they sometimes work, sometimes they don't, but as those things do.
7, it started a trend that I've continued to dislike in the series, which is like the mini game as a thing.
Yeah.
But I like what I call mini events. So like,
that's a better way of putting it. You're right.
Like
mini events.
Like the motorcycle escape, right?
Yes.
Like that was really cool. I think about the play at the beginning of Final Fantasy 9, I would call it a mini event.
Right.
Like I like that. I don't necessarily like, playing the card games or Blitzball or, that type of stuff. But they're also largely, you can leave them on their own if you want, which I appreciate. But 7, I think there were so many things like that then it became like, well, no, we need more. We need more of this, with more, and they just kept adding more and more as the series went on. I was like, no, less guys. Like, and then you get to Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, where it's like everything's a mini game.
Yeah, that's
like
what I've heard.
There's a side quest where you go to like pluck mushrooms, and there's an actual like mini game involved in picking the mushrooms. And I was like, guys, you didn't have to go this hard. You could just press a button and pick up the mushroom. It's fine. I am thinking
of the mini event is exactly what I'm talking about. That yes. I really like all the mini events that are in Final Fantasy. That is the word I will use from now on, because that's exactly the mini games themselves. Golden Saucer, it's fun. That's fine. But all these little divergent moments of different styled gameplay, I was surprised. Like, oh wow, this is actually
having to wiggle your way out of your bonds when you're playing Tifa, little things like that. Absolutely. So some of I can definitely do without. Like the recitation thing, like at Junon, I can do without that. I was real bad at pressing the buttons in unison at the Mako base. So like that type of stuff, or the Mako reactor, those types. I was like, I can take or leave these, but there are definitely some bangers in there, right? Like the submarine, like you get like a submarine like game in there for a bit when you're having like submarine warfare with Shinrun. It's like, this is fun. Cool.
This is cool.
And I think a big part of it was them kind of flexing on like, look at all the stuff that we can do now.
Yeah. And they sure did. Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that for sure. Seven down, 2 or 3 more to go. 2 or 3. Depends on how I approach next week's episode. We will see if it all comes over as 1 or if it gets broken up into 2. I don't know yet, but that is the beauty of this podcast. I really don't know week to week how these things are going to turn out at the end of the day. And I hope you're enjoying the ride, because I've really enjoyed taking it with you. If you'd like to check out more of the show, go to agamerlooksat40.com. All of my links to social media, including Blue Sky, TikTok, and even Twitter, although I am starting to distance myself from that site. It is fast becoming a cesspool. It is really becoming a very gross place to spend any time in, and I'm almost to the point where I don't want to associate with it. So if you haven't joined me on Blue Sky, please do. That's where I do a lot of my posting these days, as well, of course, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and all the other social medias. Many thanks, as always, to Kev from the Discord and Pete Harney for their editing prowess. Many thanks again to my patrons for their financial support. And thank you for not only listening to A Gamer Looks at 40, but sharing it with your friends, telling others about it. We've had a great steady flow of listeners over the last few months. I'd love to keep that train a-rolling. So please, please, please tell a friend if you enjoy the show, especially if they enjoy Final Fantasy. There's a lot for them to dive into. And until next time, just be kind to yourselves and each other.